one and all present here. A warm welcome from Department of English, Pemraj Sarda College. I am Dr. Mrunmay Gune Prasil. This is the first lecture in the online lecture series titled Reflections. The series is hosted by the Department of English from the academic year 2023 and 24. The series will hold talk around various topics related to, but not limited to, literature, theory, culture, translation, and languages. I formally request Professor Swati Rokre to introduce our honored and esteemed speaker today.
Thank you, Mrunmay. On behalf of Department of English and Pemraj Sarda College, sir, I welcome you to the lecture series. And it's my honor to introduce our esteemed guest speaker for today's lecture, Dr. Sharad Binnor. Dr. Binnor currently serves as the professor and head of the Department of English at KTHM College, Nasik, with over 22 years of teaching experience at graduate and undergraduate and graduate and postgraduate levels. His expertise spans literary theory, drama, and linguistics. In addition to his academic roles, he is actively involved in shaping the academic landscape as a member of the Board of Studies in English at Savitribai Phule Pune University and Sandeep University. He is also a valued member of Faculty of Humanities at Savitribai Phule Pune University. His contribution extends beyond academia. He is a prolific author with over 20 research articles and 4 books on language skills to his name. As an instructional and content designer, he plays an important role in shaping educational content, particularly as a content designer for YCMOU Nasik. He is also a soft skill trainer, having delivered talks on various related topics at national and state level. I welcome you to this lecture series, sir, and I'm sure that with his knowledge and experience will undoubtedly enrich our understanding in the topic.
Okay, thank you.
Adaptation of myths in Girish Karnad's, please.
Okay, good evening to one and all. I hope that I'm clearly audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Department of English, Pemraj Sarda College, Ahmednagar, for organizing this online lecture series and called Reflections, and inviting me to conduct the first session of the series. I'm also thankful to the principal of the college and my friend, Professor Madhuri Dixit, Head Department of English at the college, for giving me an opportunity to share my views on the topic adaptations of myths in Girish Karnad's plays. I'm also thankful to Swati for the generous introduction and all the organizing team members and my dear friends. Girish Karnad is quite a popular figure in Indian English drama. He has written more than a dozen plays in English and Kannada. He got Nanfid Award in 1998. So all of you are aware of this writer, his writings. Most of you have already studied or must have studied at least one play by Girish Karnad as a student of English literature. And you must have observed that Girish Karnad uses a variety of forms and his dramaturgy. Can you just start the PPT, share the PPT?
Sure, sir. I was waiting for.
Okay, Girish Karnad's commitment is not to one mode of just the next slide, one mode of dramatic writing, but is rather a kind of free floating, and he's constantly having engagement with all the available modes and resources. Hence, there is a variety of dramatic forms employed by him, and that I've just mentioned you. That when you read or watch these 12 more than 12 plays that he has written, you'll find that he has designed his plays in a very systematically progressive way, as you can see the slide. So when I say that systematically progressive way, I mean that Karnad has some sort of a structured planning, before writing any play for that matter. So when he wants to write a play, he he has a plan, and he executes the plan uh, in a very systematic way. So the first thing that he does is he finds the source for his play, and the source is mostly traced to myths, folk, or history, and he adapts that source into an appropriate dramatic form. He has used many dramatic forms, which I am going to discuss in my session. And as the sources of his plays are narrative, so he has to incorporate narrative elements in his plays. So also he has a fixed structural pattern in which he molds the adapted source. So when you read all his non-history plays, you will find that there is a single structural pattern which he has used, and we will actually elaborate. Means I'll elaborate on that particular pattern uh, in my session. So as I told you that as a first stage uh, Girish Karnad uh, starts with the source, and the source, which I have already told you that they are derived from myths, as in Yayati, Bali, the sacrifice, the fire, and the rain. Then folk tales like Haivadan, Nagamandal, and flowers. Then in history like Tughlaq, Taledanda, the dreams of Tipu Sultan, and Rakshasa Tangdi, the recent play that he had written. And he had also written plays based on contemporary reality, like Anju Malige, Broken Images, and Wedding Album. So the source of Girish Karnad's plays is very important because the source of uh, his plays actually function as a primary structural determinants. So just go to the next slide. Okay. So the sources of his plays are actually the primary structural determinants. And I have already just divided his plays into four categories based on the source that he has used, uh, which I have just mentioned. So I'm not going to repeat them. So why I'm saying that Girish Karnad's use of a particular source uh, is a primary structural determinant because it dictates, it determines the form of the play. So in that sense, in his plays, you can say the form is content, and the content is form. So if you have a structuralist analysis of Girish Karnad's plays, you can easily find out that there is a single structural paradigm that he has used in all the plays except the history plays. Okay, so the next step, that stage of his writing plays, is adaptation of these sources. Okay, so as a subsequent stage or move, Girish Karnad engages himself in what Jene calls transgeneric practice, that is, adapting uh, the mythic narrative or folk narrative or historical chronicles into drama. So changing the genre uh, uh, through adaptation. That he borrows plots from these sources and delivers them in the form of drama that is totally a different genre altogether. So in that sense, all these plays are transpositions. They are transpositions in which the original narratives are adapted with to use Sanders' words, uh, aesthetic conventions of an entirely different generic process. So he makes use of the aesthetic conventions of an entirely different genre while adapting these sources. So the adapted text in that, uh, in that sense, offers a new perspective of life, which is relevant in the present context, uh, and because Karnad draws plots from these sources because he finds them relevant, finds them, uh, we can say, suitable to reflect on the contemporary social and political life in a very subtle and systematic way. So therefore, the choice of the source, in that sense, is very important, and this particular choice actually determines the form that he is going to use. Because for myth-based plays, he uses indigenous dramatic forms. For plays based on history or historical chronicles, he makes use of the company nataka form of drama, uh, you know, and for the plays based on folk tales. I mean, he uses folk drama forms. So therefore, I'm calling these sources as primary structural determinants. Then another element that is very important, uh, uh, so far as Girish Karnad's plays are concerned, that is the use of narrative in these plays. See, all these sources are narrative. So Karnad has to employ narrative in his play. Usually, you all know that Plato makes a clear-cut distinction between diegesis and mimesis. For him, both these uh, methods of representation should not be mingled, should not be mixed, should not be blended. I mean, so there has to be absolute diegesis or absolute mimesis. But Indian plays cannot have pure narration or pure enactment. There is always mix of both. So Girish Karnad makes use of narrative in his plays, as these sources are actually narrative, as I just told you. And in that sense, it is inevitable for him to do that, because uh, he has to curtail the narrative uh, to mold it in the form of drama, you know, which is in that sense is a very short form, okay, as compared to the sources, because the sources are taken from the Mahabharata, or from folk tales. Uh, so actually, he makes use of narrative so much that in one of his plays, that is Flowers, he has not he has not used enactment at all. There is just a pure narrative by the priest. The protagonist just comes and uh, narrates the an important event from his life. Okay, and in his plays like Nagamandal, uh, there is the character of the story, and the story which narrates the story of Rani. Then you have a Bhagavata narrator in Haivadan, uh, who narrates the story of Kapila, Padmini, Devadatta. I think if you have studied that play, it's an interesting narrative. Then in the dreams of Tipu Sultan, he has used choric characters as narrators. So as you have isolated narrators, similarly you have integrated narrators as well. Like some characters play the role of narrators in his plays, like the king in Bali the Sacrifice, or choric characters in the Dreams of Tipu Sultan, or Manjula Naik in Broken Images, or Aravasu in The Fire and the Rain. So here the character actually take on the role of narrator and narrates some events, or they just use flashback technique to give us uh, background information. So most of the part of the story has been narrated in his place. So narrative in that sense is an integral part of Girish Karnad's dramaturgy. Uh, then I think in the previous slide I have mentioned structural pattern. There are common structural patterns in Girish Karnad's plays, though he has used the last slide, please. Though he has used a variety of dramatic form, but he has made use of a single structural pattern in all his non-history plays. For history plays, there is a different structural pattern. For example, if you take any of his non-history play, you will find that there is a common pattern of like betrayal and transgression, which lead to crisis, and means the protagonist transgresses, cheats, or betrays, and then he or she lands into crisis, and then he does some regressive action in order to resolve that crisis. Sometimes the crisis is resolved, leading to reintegration of characters, or it leads to a catastrophic situation. I mean, for the protagonist and those concerned. So this is a common pattern. You can take any play by Karnad and you will find the same structural pattern. Uh, and infidelity, adulterous relationship is very common in Girish Karnad's plays. The three plays which we are going to discuss today, uh, Yayati, The Fire and the Rain, and Bali the Sacrifice. All these three plays have this element, the element of adultery, because of which there is a crisis, and the protagonist tries to resolve this crisis. Okay, let us just next slide. Yes. Before discussing adaptation of myths in Girish Karnad's plays, we have to understand the process of adaptation. Okay, see, whenever we actually, as I have discussed earlier, that you have to pay attention to Girish Karnad's uh, use of sources, in his plays. So in that, because Karnad wanted to become Shakespeare of India. So as Shakespeare borrowed plots from many sources, similarly, Karnad also borrowed plots from myths, folk tales, and history. So in that sense, most of Girish Karnad's plays are adaptations. So you have to pay uh, um, attention to the sources of Karnad's plays, because every text has a source, in that, because the plot is derived from somewhere. I mean, that's why we have to pay closer attention to the sources of his plays. See, adaptation is a very common practice because, according to Peter Allen, I would like to quote here. According to Peter Allen, every literary text, to Peter Allen, literary texts uh, are built from systems, codes, and traditions established by previous works of literature. So, or as Bakhtin views, each utterance is filled with echoes and reverberations of other utterances. It refutes, affirms, supplements, and relies on the others, presupposes them to be known, and somehow takes them into accounts. Unquote. So Bakhtin and both Peter think that no one can understand an utterance or even a written work as if it was singular in meaning, unconnected to previous and future utterances or works. Therefore, the exercise of finding finding how the original texts are adapted and the new meaning the new meaning generated in the process is worth attempting. So adaptation studies or study into any sort of adaptation is really worth attempting because it really offers us with a new perspective on the subject. Okay, then if you want to understand the process of adaptation, I have mentioned two important terms on the slide: Julia Kristeva's intertextuality and Jane's transtextuality. So in order to understand the process of adaptation, you must understand these two concepts. That intertextuality, which was introduced by or coined by Julia Kristeva in her essay, the bounded text, 1980s. It was used to refer to the permutations of permutation of text by utterances and semiotic signifiers uh, taken from other texts. Okay, so the term has undergone a change, now, but it is used to refer to the affiliation of the text to other texts. So, you know, so every text, has a kind of affiliation to the other text, to the text which were written before it. So, in that sense, intertextuality is a very important term because it helps us understand the process of adaptation. Because in adaptation, also, the adapted text has uh, the affiliation to the source text. Okay, M.H. Abraham defines intertextuality as multiple ways in which any one literary text is in fact made up of other texts by means of its open or covert citations and allusions, its repetitions and transformations of the formal and substantive features of earlier texts. So, intertextuality in that sense is an interaction between the source text and the adapted, and this interaction results in new interpretation, in some kind of a new interpretation. So, and then another term that Jene has used is uh, transtextuality, which is actually his version of intertextuality. It For him, transtextuality uh, sets the text in a relationship, whether obviously or concealed with other text. That's what he says. And he identifies 5 types of transtextuality. So uh, the first is intertextuality, which covers quotations, plagiarism, and allusion. Then paratextuality, which contains titles, uh, prefaces, interviews, uh, publicity announcements, reviews. Then metatextuality, which consists of commentary by uh, a text on another. Then architectuality, showing a text relation to a genre. And the most important type in the present context is transtextuality, that is hypertextuality, uh, which is involving any relationship which unites a text B to, that is hypertext, to an earlier text, that is the source text, which he calls hypertext, upon which it is grafted, upon which it is based. In Okay, so the hypertextuality refers to the process of adaptation. That is how a hypertext, uh, that is the source text, is adapted to produce a hypertext. Hypertext is the adapted text. Okay. So this last term is important in examining the process of adaptation in Karnad's place. See, both the intertextuality and transtextuality or hypertextuality involves adaptation of the source text. Therefore, it is necessary to define this whole process of adaptation. To Linda Hutchinson, uh, adaptation can be defined from 3 perspectives. Uh, Adaptation, the first is adaptation as a formal entity or product, that is an announced and extensive transposition of a particular work or works, and it involves shifting of medium or genre or changing of frame or context. Okay. Then second, adaptation is a process of creation which involves uh, reinterpretation and recreation. It is also known as appropriation. Then the third perspective is that the process of reception, that how the adaptation is received. So adaptation, being a form of intertextuality, always has an extended intertextual engagement uh, with uh, with with the adapted text, according to Hutchins. Okay, Linda Hutchins, sorry. While we can say Girish Karnad's Yati can be considered as the instance or example of the first perspective, that is adaptation. Then Dharmavir Bharati's Andayug uh, is an instance or is an example of the second, that is a process of creation. And Shirwadkar's Yayati uh, can be considered as an example of the third perspective, the third category, that is the process of perception. Okay, I hope that I am clearly audible. Hello? Hello? Gune ma'am?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes.
I'll let you know.
Okay. 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 See, adaptation offer new perspective, viewpoint, which is not realized uh, or focused in the source text, and therefore adaptation are actually undertaken because it helps the writer to reflect on the contemporary scenario, because the source text is still relevant and it can be used uh, as as a text for reinterpretation. Okay. The next thing is, I think, fidelity. Okay, so fidelity is the issue of fidelity uh, is 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 a much talked about issue in the field of adaptation. The expectation of fidelity is based on the assumption that the aim of adaptation is merely to reproduce the source text, but that is not the case. Fidelity is very important in translation, but in case of adaptation, it is not that much important. Though some scholars insist on being honest to the text. But adaptation is not just an imitation of the source text; it is more than that. So, how more the adaptation, I can say that more the adaptation deviates from the source text, more creative and original it becomes. So, in that sense, fidelity is not very important. So, the question of fidelity towards the source text is, in that sense, very irrelevant as it undermines the creativity and innovativeness of the adapted text. Okay. Um, so, in that sense, many scholars these days just clearly reject this aspect of fidelity. Okay. Uh, we can quote Peter Brooker here. He says that the criterion of fidelity is perhaps the most stubborn and most futile and deluded of these attitudes. Futile because, strictly speaking, fidelity is fidelity can only mean literal repetition, and deluded because a judgment of success or failure is clearly dependent on differently situated strategies of interpretation. Unquote. So, in that sense, fidelity to the original text or source text is unwanted, is not required. Karnad makes many necessary changes to the source text to adapt them to the dramatic text or dramatic genre. He's a non-believer in the issue of fidelity to the text. He invents characters or events and adds them to the source text so as to make them uh, more relevant and suggestive. Therefore, his plays offer uh, new perspectives, new frameworks on the source text, uh, and therefore his plays appeal to the different generation, appeal to different generation. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Adaptations of myth. See, myths have been one of the major sources of dramatic writing or any literary writing in India. Myths drawn from uh, Sanskrit epics, other Hindu or Buddhist or Persian mythology uh, provide provide a good source of textual material to Indian writers. The practice of falling back on the ancient tradition was in vogue, was popular mostly it became popular mostly in the latter part of 19th century. That is in the formative formative stages of modern Indian drama. Initially, these plays, the plays based on myths, were rejected as mythological plays. But however, their symbolic commentary on contemporary political and social life established them as one of the important categories of Indian dramatic uh, writing. Okay. Then the playwrights since then, since late 19th century, are employing myths not just to clarify and comment on the present, but also to present a critic of cultural traditions which they conf- they confront, question, uh, subvert, and at times even reject. Okay, so the use of myths thus played an important role in the emergence and popularization of Indian drama in the 19th century. Uh, these myths were uh, these myths were adapted to the stage uh, earlier, before independence. These myths were adapted to the stage uh, under the influence of European theatre. So the playwrights were influenced by European theatrical practices. Uh, so playwrights used Western forms to adapt these myths. And Marlowe, Shakespeare, Ben Jonson were their masters, their idols, and they imitated their style of adaptation, uh, imitated their uh, methods of uh, writing plays. You know, so writers like Rabindranath Tagore, then Ketkar, N.C. Ketkar, then you can Khadilkar, there's Bhartendu, Harishchandra. All these writers made use of myths in their plays, but they modeled their plays on the Western forms. Okay, even Dada Saib Phalke, I think all of you know Dada Saib Phalke, the father of Indian cinema. He adapted the myth of Harishchandra Taranani, Taramati, sorry, Harishchandra Taramati in the first Indian film uh, uh, entitled, I think, Raja Harishchandra. So even the first film, Indian film, produced by an Indian, uh, had the adaptation of myths. So, um, but these writers did not realize the uh, true potential of myths. They did not realize that these myths not just provided them with ready-made textual material, but also indigenous, traditional narratives and dramatic structures. So they just uh, use the textual material, used myths as textual material, but they did not find the traditional indigenous dramatic structures uh, contained in these myths. Uh, so the trend of using myths and history as textual material for dramatic writing, continued. It continued. It continued in the post-independence period, and writers like Girish Karnad, then we can say Badal Sarkar, Dharmavir Bharti, and these dramatists, they adapted myths very effectively. Uh, and why they used myths? Because myths have a pan-Indian character. It is the only source of material that is shared by the Indians all over the world. So therefore, myths are uh, commonly adapted for uh, dramatic form or dramatic genre. Uh, okay, you can quote Shishir Kumar Das here. Okay, they they means myths. Myths are myths have deep structures of perceptions on which are constructed new images and allegories, fables and parables, types and archetypes. These deep structures have become part of the psyche of the whole literary community, irrespective of the levels of education among them and the ideology and religious faith that divide them in varying degree. So he says that it's a very common thing, one quote. It's a common practice among Indian playwrights, because it's a common practice among Indian playwrights to adapt myths because myths are part of the common psyche of the whole literary community as well as uh, the layman, common Indian citizens. Okay, and they think that he thinks that these myths provide an ample opportunity for the writers uh, to recreate, to reinterpret these myths, uh, to comment on the contemporary scenario. Okay, so most of the plays. So another fact that is very important here is that most of the plays written or the plays which are based on myths are character oriented. They are character oriented. So some famous mythic figures such as Yayati, Sita, Krishna, Rama, Karna, Arjuna, Kama, Bhishma, and Savitri, and there are many more. They are uh, revisited frequently, and their lives are scrutinized and analyzed from different points of view. They are the archetypes of uh, Indian drama in that sense. These archetypes, which are fixed in the collective unconscious of Indians. Okay. So these these writers, everybody knows these characters, their lives, some incidents about their lives. So they are part of our collective unconscious. And the most popular mythic episodes which are adapted in Indian plays are the romance of Krishna, stripping of Draupadi's, unjust treatment meted out to meted against Karna, Abhimanyu's sad death, Sita's abduction and banishment, Yayati's transgression. So these are the common episodes which are frequently exploited, adapted in Indian plays, and they are uh, giving new interpretations. Okay, to tell you one thing, that even the origin of Indian dramatic tradition, even the origin of Indian dramatic tradition is itself close to a sort of myth. Okay, so if you take the text of The Fire and the Rain, where uh, Girish Karnad has actually mentioned this myth. Okay, so the Indian plays have naturally drawn sources from myths because it's the origin of drama in India itself is based on uh, uh, the myth. Uh, he says the first chapter of Bharata's Natya Shastra gives us the myth of the origin of drama. Okay, and the myth is like this: it was a time when the moral fiber of the society had weakened, irrational passions held sway, and people had surrendered themselves to their baser instincts. Knowledge of the Vedas, which presumably could have saved the situation, being restricted to the upper strata of the society, a medium was required that entertained and could restore the health of the society by reaching out to all the people, regardless of their position in the social hierarchy. On being implored by Indra and other gods to provide such an instrument, Brahma, the father of the universe, took the text from the Rig Veda, the art of performance from the Yajur Veda, the song from the Sam Veda, and rasa, that is aesthetic experience, from the Atharva Veda, and created a fifth Veda called the Natya Veda. But Indra realized that the gods were unable to deal with this new form and passed it on to a human preceptor, Bharata. And Bharata, with the help of his 100 sons and some nymphs, specially created by Brahma for the purpose, staged the first play. Unquote. So, the origin of drama in India itself is a kind of myth. So, it's but natural for Indian playwrights to fall back upon myths for sources. Okay, another thing is that, uh, myths are cultural constructs which and record present and further regulate or validate the moral system of a society. So, with its precepts and examples, myths provide a rationale for the value and practices of a society. These narratives are mythic narratives are privileged as the collective wisdom of the elders and as the wisdom of the ages. Okay, so they become uh, very pervasive arguments, pervasive component in the consciousness of a society, and therefore the use of myths in drama has definite aesthetic advantages, both as a thematic statement and as a structural principle that I have already mentioned. That these sources function as structural determinants. Okay, so also it serves the ideological and cultural, so serves as the ideological and cultural code of this society, which the creative writer has to negotiate in trying to come to term with his own cultural heritage. Okay, so in this process, he is able to foreground the contradictions which are blurred in the traditional discourse, as he also fills in the motivated gaps, and retrieve the erased text, and thus subvert it from within. Okay, so Girish Karnad's adaptation of the myth of the cock of dawn in Bali the sacrifice reflects on the dialectics of violence and non-violence, which is a vital point of debate in Indian society. The belief of Jain and Hindu religions in regard to animal sacrifice are juxtaposed to discuss their validity through this myth of the cock of dawn. I'm going to discuss it soon when I'll discuss that play. Okay. Uh, then treatment of myth. Okay. Yes. In literature, the treatment of myth, broadly speaking, falls into three categories. First, the transmission and recording of the original myth. Okay, the first is the transmission and recording of the original myth. Second, it's elaboration by later writers, and the third is adaptation of the myth or its use as the material for work of literature. At present, uh, we are concerned with the third category, that is adaptation of myths into literature as a textual material. Okay, Girish Karnad has engaged himself with narratives taken from myths, folktales, history, and contemporary reality, uh, because he has a purpose. Because these narratives from the past provide him a structure of shared beliefs, and it is also a conscious attempt, on his part, that is to infuse the country with cultural vitality and to awaken the national spirit. I don't know whether some of you will agree with me, but Karnal has that particular intention behind using myths, folktales, and history. Karnad hence has woven a fabric out of myths, history, and folktales, uh, because he finds them very relevant and very suitable, which I am come. मी त्याच्याकडे येतो थोड्या वेळाने. He began his career, by writing on the myth of Yayati. So he started using myths in his very first play, and this myth is very common because Yayati has been adapted in various languages, and it's a very popular story. Uh, but he was not that much aware of the indigenous or native dramatic forms at that time. So he made use of existentialist theatrical form to adapt the myth of Yayati. But in his later plays, like The Fire and the Rain and Bali the Sacrifice, he has made use of indigenous dramatic forms. Okay. To Aparna Dharwadkar, each successive plays by Karnad, each successive play by Karnad is a departure, or makes a departure in a major new direction, and the invention of a new form appropriate to his content, unquote. So according to her, every play, every alternate play has has a different source. For example, if he has based the play on myths, in the next play he used folk tales or then history. So every play is is a step towards something new, you know, and therefore he invents a new form to adapt these sources. And why Girish Karnad relies on indigenous theatrical forms after reality, because uh, he we can say very self-consciously belonged to the group called Theatre of Notes, which was started by Suresh Avasti. Uh, the attempt, actually, this group was aimed at seeking traditional forms and patterns to address general Indian ethos in dramatic writing. Okay, so Avasti advocated use of indigenous theatrical forms uh, in Indian plays, and that's why after attending the workshop of Suresh Avasti, Karnad wrote Haivadan, and Vijay Tendulkar wrote Kashiram Kotwa. They are both these plays are very important examples of this school of writing, theater of roots. Okay, these writers were actually inspired by this very quest for roots, quest for identity. You know, and the specific feature of this group are recourse to stylization, uh, use of mask, music, dance, then use of myths, folk tales for plots, then use of narrative elements, and use of classical and regional theatrical forms such as Kutiyattam, Kathakali, Yakshagana, and all these features are very much present in the plays of Girish Karnad. I have already discussed a lot about Karnad's use of sources in his plays. So Karnad's concept of drama is very simple. That is to convey the intended message through allegorical structures. Okay. So these myths provide Karnad with allegorical structures. So th- these myths uh, are selected because they are relevant and enable him to reflect on the contemporary social and political life in a more subtle and systematic way. For example, Tughlaq. Tughlaq uh, uh, is a commentary on the post Nehru era. Okay, so these adaptations help Karnad to deal with the contemporary reality. So also there are many taboos and forbidden things in the world which cannot be addressed overtly, or cannot be discussed overtly. So uh, if you discuss them, you can invite the uh, anger or ire of society unnecessarily. You know what is happening nowadays. So sources such as myths, folk, or historical events, or lives of historical figures offer him with a safety valve or a safety bet, which enables the expression of the unacceptable or uh, forbidden ideas in an acceptable manner. Okay, so such practice is an attempt at risk avoidance. You know, uh, and yes, when you adapt uh, sources from myths, folk tales, or history, uh, uh, which it helps you market your place very easily. So in that sense, it is a money making exercise as well, because the myth is very if it is very popular, then people just come and watch the play. So that is also another reason behind adaptation. So it helps to him to avoid censorship or criticism from the establishment, and but the uh, we can say well aware audience can easily understand the intention behind these adaptations. Okay, so the thoughtful audience can easily uh, understand the implied meaning of these adaptations. Okay, uh, next slide. Gune ma'am. Okay, how much time do I have? किती वेळ राहिले? अजून अर्धा तास बोलता येईल ना?
Madhuri ma'am, can you answer?
म्हणजे मी अजून
माधुरी मॅम
बोलायचं आहे, प्लेस बद्दल बोलायचं आहे. अर्धा तास अजून बोलतो मी, चालेल ना?
चालेल sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Just share the slide. Like the first play that Karnad wrote in 1960 is Yayati, and the play is based on a very popular myth of Yayati. The story of Yayati is one of the most adapted stories in Indian literature. Uh, Many writers have adapted the story of Yayati, to Nanpit Awadi from Maharashtra, Khadilkar and Khandekar and Kusmagraj. They adapted the story of Yayati. I think you all know the story of Yayati, so I'll not talk about that. I'll just keep the discussion of the plot, the hypotext. Let's move to the adaptation of this myth. You know, uh, the myth of Yayati Devani Sharmista uh, has been, as it is, you know, a most adapted myth. But Karnad, Karnad's adaptation of Yayati's myth stand out. Because Karnad, though follows the story very strictly, as the past of the characters is concerned, uh, like the prenuptial conflicting relation between Yayati and Sharmista, then Yayati's encounter with Devyani, whom he found in a well after her quarrel with Sharmista, and his marriage with Devyani. Uh, this narrative form the part of exposition, which is spread over throughout the play. Uh, then the liaison of Yayati with Sharmista and his willingness to marry her angers Devyani, and she makes her father Shukracharya curse Yayati for his transgression to become decrepitude. Uh, so all these details are followed by Karna. But the changes that he had made to the narrative is the interpolation. Interpolation is one of the features of adaptation, where the writer invents characters or events which are not part of the original narrative. Okay, so Karnad invents the character of Chitralekha as a wife of Puru, uh, and this character is a great contribution to this adaptation because she questions the moral authority of Yayati in taking her husband's youth for his sensuous pleasure, and she asks Yayati to fulfill all the duties which her husband was supposed to perform, as he has taken over his youth. Okay, so this questioning is very intensive, very strong, and it makes a very strong impact on the audience. Then another character that is invented here is Swarnalata's character. Okay, and Swarnalata's story runs parallel to the disenchantment experienced by the latter, by Chitralika. Swarnalata has also lost her husband and thinks that death brings peace. According to her, the death brings peace, that is the deliverance from uncertainty, to quote from Yayati. However, she repents, her statement where she finds that Chitraleka, taking cue from Swarnalata's speech, commits suicide. Just as Swarnalata's husband deserted her when he learned about her relationship with her teacher, similarly, Devani too deserts uh, Yayati her after he makes love to Sharmista. So, Swarnalata's married life is Karnad's addition to the original thing. Then transpositional practices are also very important in adaptation activity. So because there is a genre switch in adaptation. Here, so mythic story is which appeared in the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata uh, is adapted and delivered uh, to the new audience. You know, by changing the genre through transpositional practices. So in order to fit this long narrative into a play, Karnad had to make lot of changes. Reality story which happened over many years is shown to be happening in a very limited span of time in Karnad's reality. So he has to he had to cut or shorten many action units to focus on the core part of the myth, that is transplantation of age. You know, most of the events, uh, most of the events are merely narrated and conveyed or suggested by characters. And the past of Devani and Sharmista, Shukracharya's cursing, Yayati, then Uru's marriage, and many other events are just narrated. They are not presented on the stage. So the long narrative of Yayati is presented in the form of action that covers the time of a single day. So also the form that Karnad used in this play is the climatic structure, uh, and it is actually the structure which is very common in classical Greek theatre. So it follows Fritax normative pyramid structure, dramatic structure, plot structure. I mean, very strictly in that sense. So it begins with exposition, then through climax reaches to the resolution. So the plot is very linear and moves in a single line with few subplots or counterplots. Plots, and the line of action proceeds in cause and effect chain. The characters and events are closely linked in a sequence of logical, uh, logical, and almost inevitable developments. It follows the. It also follows the three dramatic unit, three unities of dramatic creation. That the unity of time, place, and action. Uh, okay. I think I should move to the fire and the rain, because you are more interested in that. The next, Girish Karnad, the fire and the rain is based on the myth of Yavakri or Yavakrita from chapter 135 to 38 of the Vanaparva, that is the forest canto of the Mahabharata. Karnad came across this myth in C. Rajagopalachari's abridged version of the Mahabharata, and it remained with him for almost uh, 37 years until he was commissioned by Guthrie Theatre Minneapolis to write the play, that is The Fire and the Rain, in 1993. Um, See, the source of the play is already given in the text itself. If you have the text with you, uh, in the notes section, the myth of Yavikri has been given. There were two sages, Bharadwaja. Uh, shall I read or the myth that there were two sages, Bharadwaja and Raibhya, who were good friends. I think I need not to read because it's a long narrative. But I just come to the adaptation of this myth. Will it be ordered? Because I have only 10-15 minutes left. Uh, see, Girish Karnad, transpositional participant English. Okay. Girish Karnad follows the narrative of Lobasha very strictly in The Fire and the Rain. He starts the play with the fire sacrifice meant to begin, meant to bring rain, as it has not rained for many years. So here we come to know about Aravasu's banishment from the fireplace for committing the sin of patricide. Then Karnad focuses on the unjust treatment meted out to Aravasu more than any other aspect of the story. In the beginning, the original narrative neglects this aspect of the story. So Karnad invents a character of Nitilai to show how Aravasu suffers for what he has not done. Aravasu kills his father unknowingly and asks Aravasu to perform the penitential rites as he was the chief priest uh, at the fire sacrifice. You all know the story. And when Aravasu joins Parasu at the fire sacrifice, the latter puts the blame of patricide on the former. Uh, he thus betrays his brother. As a result, he is banished from the fire sacrifice for the act of patricide. So Arosu also loses a chance to win the hand of Nitilai at village panchayat as he reaches late there due to the penitential rites he has to conduct. So he is at greater loss than anybody in the play. The three acts of the plays are used for character revelation of three characters. Okay, Yavakri, Paravasu, and Aravasu. These three characters are revealed through three acts of the play. Uh, It is the last character, Arasu, who though initially seems to lose, but ultimately triumphs. Ultimately, is the victor. Thus, Karnad succeed in lending a rightful treatment to the mythic character Arasu that was treated unjustly in the original original version of the soul. Uh, this type of practice is called Shuddhikaran, cleansing. Uh, there are so many characters which are treated very badly in the original myths, but Sanskrit playwrights and many contemporary playwrights have also adapted these myths in order to uh, give a rightful treatment, proper treatment that these characters deserve. Like Karna, then Bhishma. So which the Karnad's character was treated very badly in the Mahabharata, but some of the adaptation of the epic offering his rightful place with the treatment that he deserved. The Fire and the Rain has been written in the classical theatrical form, uh, suggesting the influence of both classical Greek tragedies and classical Sanskrit plays. So it carries the influence of both these theatrical traditions. Though very extensive discussion on the origin of drama and classical Sanskrit theatre, uh, Sanskrit drama is given uh, in the notes provided with the text by Girish Karnad. Uh, the play, I think, shows that the playwright had been more influenced by the structure of the classical Greek tragedies than the classical Sanskrit theatre. Okay, so um, it follows the definition of tragedy given by Aristotle. Like this, the Fire and the Rain is an imitation of serious action, having magnitude and is complete in itself. It follows the three unities of dramatic creation. It arouses pity and fear and thereby brings about the catharsis of these emotions. So, like classical tragedies, it has feature of prologue and epilogue, framing the flashback narratives of the play. And the prologue informs us about the fire sacrifice and the actor manager's proposal to perform a play. Uh, then the actor managers request Parasu to include Aravasu as actor in the play. Parasu allows his brother to take part in the play. In the first, Yavakri arrives and he seduces uh, Visha, Vishakha. Then Rayava kills Yavakri for this act by invoking the Brahma Rakshasa. Then in the second act, the second act shows the arrival of Paravasu from the sacrifice and how he kills his father and why Paravasu is banished from entering the sacrificial precinct and how he loses Mithilan, etc. And the act third presents Aravasu meeting with the actor manager and their decision to perform a play. And in the epilogue, the play is performed uh, in which Aravasu plays the role of Ritra, and uh, during that play, Nitilai is found by her husband and she was killed. She's killed. Then Paravasu also enters into the fire and kills himself. And the Indra arrives and he asks Aravasu to ask for something as he's very pleased with his performance. And that time, Aravasu decides to request Indra to bring Mithilai back, make her alive again. But the Brahma Rakshas request him to have his release instead of Mithilai. And finally, Aravasu relents to the request of the Brahma Rakshasa and request Indra to release the Brahma Rakshasa. Okay. Shall I move to the next play? Do I have time or hello?
Yes,
Okay.
Dr. Binnor.
Hmm.
Hello.
Yes.
I would suggest that if you can linger more on the fire and the rain, that will be better for the sake of the students.
Okay. Okay then. Um, See, the fire and the rain is reflect with many instances of narrative, since it traces its origin to the narrative of the ascetic Lomasha. So It contains the story of Yavakri and Paravasu, along with the secondary story of Aravasu and Mithilai. So also in the epilogue, there is the play within play, and where we have this episode of Indra and Vritra. Uh, so there are three narratives which intermingle and form the main action of the play. And in order to deal with these three narratives, Girish Karnad has to employ various narrative strategies, such as the prologue, the messenger, framing narratives, flashback narratives, play within play. You know, the prologue is a kind of the framing exposition. You know, it provides the frame to the play. So it serves the purpose of exposition. It is a dialogic exposition, unlike the monologic exposition of the Sutradhara. Here, through the dialogues of the characters, one comes to know about the ongoing fire sacrifice, and that is being conducted to propitiate the gods uh, for for getting rains, as there has been no adequate rain for almost 10 years. Besides the relationship between and Paravasu and his brother Aravasu is also revealed here. See, in the notes, I think Karnad has talked about the relation between brothers. What kind of relationship do we have in most of the myths with regard to the relationship of brothers or cousins? Uh, like in the Mahabharata, the relationship between the Pandavas and the Kurus is kind of enmity. There is enmity between these the cousins. Then in Ramayana, the fraternal bonding in the Raghu family, Rama and his brothers, expresses a different facet of brotherhood. Whereas in the Ramayana, you have this betrayal of Sugriva and Vibhishana. So this marks the counterpoint. Then the tale of Aravasu and Paravasu fascinated him as an unusual variant of the Indian obsession with fratricide, and it seemed logical to that Yavakri should be their cousin, though the Mahabharata does not explicitly say so. He said that I cannot remember when I decided to incorporate the Indra Vritra legend in my plot, but years later, while rereading the original version, I was astonished to find that right at the beginning of the tale of Yavakri, Lomasha mentioned that the whole story took place on the banks of a river in which Indra had bathed to cleanse himself of the sin of killing Vritra. One of the fascinating aspects of dealing with myths is their self-reflexivity. A myth seems complete in itself, and yet, when examined in detail, contains subconscious signals which lead you onto another myth, which in turn will act as a conduit to a third one while illuminating the one you started with. So, while adapting one myth, you come across another myth, and the chain of adaptation continues. According to Karna. So then we have flashback narratives. Like in flashback, there are flashback narratives which narrates the past happening in the play. So the three acts of the Fire and the Rain are actually flashbacks, since they represent what happened a month ago. They contain necessary background information for the understanding of the main action. And these flashbacks are provided through the speeches of some characters like Andhaka, Yavakri, Vishakha, and Brahma Rakshasa. Okay, then in the in the epilogue, you have a play performed by the actor manager. So there is a play within play also in the Fire and the Rain. This play depicts the fight between Ritra and Indra. And it is shown that how Indra betrays his own brother, Vishwarupa, by killing him because he was insecure. He thought that Vishwarupa would take over uh, uh, his power, his empire, and all that. So Ritra, another brother of Indra, becomes angry and attacks him. Indra relates about the birth of Vishwarupa and Ritra in the following narrative. Should not Brahma, the father of all creation, who gave me birth, uh, have ensured that I stood unrivaled in all these domains? But alas, he fell in love with a mortal. One minute. He fell in love with a mortal and produced a son by human womb, where he crowned the king of men, Vishwarupa. Everyone admires Vishwarupa, everyone sings his praises. His wisdom and gentleness and mastery of the laws inspires a love which makes him feel like the eclipsed moon. It threatens my sovereignty of the worlds, but how can I destroy him? For my father mated with a woman from the netherworld and created a third son, a demon, Ritra. He made him the king of the netherworld and told him, Ritra, protect your brother Vishwarupa, the king of men, if necessary, with your own life, for Indra is bound to try and harm him. Then Indra killed him, and Ritra uh, came to take revenge. He also decided to kill Indra, and Aravasu plays the role of Ritra, and the mask that he wears of Ritra, yeah, takes over him, and he uh, runs as a mad person. He follows Indra, the one who is playing the role of Indra, very madly, and then Indra is pleased with his performance, and then comes to uh, fulfill his desire. Shall I stop here? Hello? Or shall I move to the next? Do I have time? Gune ma'am, I think it is 1.5 hours.
Sir, if you could just sum up a short summary of the last play, it would be great.
Okay,
Precise.
actually, Bali the sacrifice is based on Jain myth of the myth of the cock of dawn, and Karnad came across this myth in Yashoda Charite, a book by Jana. Jana was a Jain poet who was considered to be one of the major classical poets in Kannada. He is known for two significant verse narratives, Yashoda Charite, the story of King Yashodhara, and Anantanatha Purana, the legend of Anantanatha, the 14th Tirthankara. Yashoda Charita is a short epic verse narrative in 319 stanzas. it relates the story of King Yashoda that has been a famous myth in India since the 7th century. Uh, this Jana had drawn his material from Vadiraja's Sanskrit work of 11th century. Uh, that is Yasho Sthilaka Champu. And this Vadiraja means Yashoda Charitin, Vadiraja, sorry. Then actually this particular book uh, deals with the myth of the cock of dough, uh, according to which there was a Hindu king. He marries a Jain uh, uh, lady, and she's against the violent practices of Hindu religion. But she falls in love with a very ugly Mahout, and she spends the night with him. And uh, her mother-in-law and the king finds it out, and then hello, they decide to perform uh, animal sacrifice. Uh, uh, in order to pacify the gods. Because the queen has committed adultery, but the queen is against these practices. She does not like the idea of performing an animal sacrifice. So the king decides to perform the animal sacrifice symbolically. So they prepare the cock of dough and decides to give it as a sacrifice. Okay. So when the king puts the sword on the cock comes alive, and then the king and the mother-in-law, they are cursed, and then they have to take many births as fierce animal, and then they are again reborn as children of Yashoda, King Yashoda. Okay, that is the story. Uh, the This particular myth is adapted by Karnad uh, in uh, in the form of a discussion play. So the play presents a dialectics of violence and non-violence, uh, through this myth. And the dialogues between the queen and the mother contain flashback or retrospective narratives, which gives details about their characters. And you all know that a discussion play is kind of play in which there is less action and more discussion. So in this play also there is less action but more discussion. Uh, and so also Balida sacrifice has the tripartite structure of anticipation, scenic realization, and retrospection. So the king's song, in the beginning, uh, anticipates the central action of the play, that is sexual transgression of Amrutamati, that is the queen. Then the two important episodes of moral transgression of the queen and the symbolic sacrifice of the cock of dough are presented cynically. And the last song uh, looks back on the issues of violence and non-violence in new perspective, that is retrospection. So it has that tripartite structure of anticipation, cynic realization, and retrospection. Okay. Okay. I hope that all of you have understood uh, whatever that I have just discussed in my session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll hand over to Madhuri ma'am now.
Hello. Can I speak Mumbai now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
And am
Yes,
I
ma'am.
audible?
Yes, ma'am. You
Yeah.
are audible.
Okay. Yeah. So the formal vote of thanks, Dr. Binnor, would be given by one of our students. But right now, I would like to give a few remarks, which I should have given right in the beginning of the lecture. But due to some unavoidable circumstances about which I had informed you before the lecture, I could not be in the studio right in the beginning of the lecture. So I ask your pardon, as well as I ask pardon of my colleagues and also the present and future audience of this lecture. Sorry for this late appearance in the online program. But let me say a few things before we move on to the formal vote of thanks by Sakshi. Um, this is a series of lectures that we have inaugurated in this current academic year, that is 2023-24, and we have named it as Reflections simply because we want our colleagues to be reflective in their academic exercises and to uh, pass on their views, opinions, comments, and if they see any problems in the topics that are of particular academic interest to them. And that's why we have named this series as Reflections. So I'm very happy to lately, this kind of offering my delayed welcome to Dr. Binnor to the online presence of Department of English, Pemraj Sarda College. And I'm also happy, sir, to listen to your lecture, which was a reflective exercise, I do admit. And I hope that the students or whoever are interested in Dr. Girish Karnad's place would be listening to this lecture again at their own leisure and try to understand and once again reflect in their own right on the views that you have presented today in the lecture. So, once again, I'm sorry for being very late in passing on my remarks, but I would also like to say that we would like to welcome Dr. Binnor to our department physically someday in near future. With this remark, I will pass on the baton, so to say, to Sakshi, who would offer a formal vote of thanks. Sakshi is our second year BA student, and she is
Thank you,
also
ma'am.
the student of this play, The Fire and the Rain. So I would like to hear what she says about this lecture. Over to you, Sakshi.
Yes, ma'am. Rollo May's quote, "A myth is a way of making sense in a senseless world," was echoed in a discussion on Karnad's artistic genius and his use of mythological elements in his plays. Dr. Sharad Binnor's meticulous explanation of Karnad's myth usage enriched our intellectual understanding and sparked a renewed appreciation for storytelling. I would like to thank Principal Dr. Maheshwari Gavit and Department of English at Pemraj Sarda College for organizing this online lecture. Dr. Binor's expertise and passion were acknowledged, and we look forward to future enriching sessions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Uh, so the last and final thing for the audiences, if you have some more questions which you would like to ask to Dr. Binnor, please mail them to the department. We also have our website presence, which goes by sardacollege.org, and you'll find our department there, so you can write to us later, which we can pass on to Dr. Binnor. Thank you, Dr. Binnor. Thank you very
Okay, thank you,
much
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
accepting the invitation and delivering this lecture. Yeah.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mrunmai, also for being the what to say kind of anchor and very supportive figure today in this online lecture series. Thank you, Dr. Patil, and thank you, Dr. Rokde, for being there as my colleagues and helping me and Mrunmai in this exercise of online lecture series. Thank you all. With this, we'll meet tomorrow at the same time with a new speaker and a new topic. So see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.